Hey there, deep divers. It's Julie B, and today I'm bringing you my theory on the bombshell truth behind Joey Ellis's death on HBO's freshman season of Duster. One of the biggest questions on the series is whether or not mob boss Ezra Saxton put a hit out on Joey. Did he really do it or not? Well, I think we need to broaden our thinking on that question, because it's not simply a question of who killed Joey. We should also be asking ourselves this: is Joey even really dead at all? I'm going to cut right to the chase here. I would argue that Joey isn't dead. The feds faked his death and covered it up, which is why they've worked so hard to impede Nina's investigation into the supposed accident. And here's the kicker. I predict that a key but as yet unseen player will actually turn out to be Joey, the mysterious Xavier who has been brought up multiple times but has yet to appear on screen. Stick with me to the end and I'll explain, but without further ado, let's get into it. This new J.J. Abrams mob thriller hit the ground running with a highly entertaining blend of action, mystery, humor, and 70s nostalgia. Lost fan favorite Josh Holloway leads the way as Jim Ellis, with his effortless charisma as a driver for a Phoenix crime syndicate, cruising around Arizona in a flashy red Duster. But make no mistake, this show has much more depth than it may appear on the surface. It's not just about flashy cars and his big toothy grin. As the season has progressed, we've learned that there's a surprisingly complex mystery going on that's much larger in scope than just an investigation into this local crime syndicate. There's a much larger conspiracy and cover-up that involves the FBI, the CIA, and the Soviet Union. It even reaches up as high as the White House and Capitol Hill. The basic premise of the series is the unlikely pairing of Jim, a mob driver, with Nina Hayes, a new FBI agent who joins forces with him to take down his boss, Ezra Saxton. Nina's mission against Saxton is personal to her because she believes that he put a hit out on her father, so she appeals to Jim to partner with her to take Saxton down by expressing her belief that Sax did the same to his late brother Joey. As proof, she shows Jim video surveillance footage revealing that the explosion that blew up Joey's van originated from beneath it, thereby exposing that it was not a propane tank explosion, as the police report had stated. Still, Jim agrees to work with her not to prove that Sax is guilty, but to prove that he's actually innocent. He doesn't want to believe Sax is capable of this because he, his father Wade, and his late brother Joey all consider Sax to be family. Now, first of all, while Sax is guilty of many things, and I'm sure the hit on Nina's father was one of them, I've never believed he's guilty of killing Joey. He's expressed genuine affection and grief over the loss of Joey a couple times now. And in one instance, he brought up the subject of Joey on his own to Jim, reflecting on how much he wishes Joey were still here. Sax had been grooming Joey to be his second in command and looked at him and the other Ellis men as family, having served with Jim and Joey's father Wade in World War II. Now, I have to note that Sax didn't specifically say he wished Joey were still alive. His words were, quote, "I wish he were still here," unquote. Perhaps he knows Joey is actually still alive and just misses him being his right-hand man. Either way, he seemed genuinely sad, to the point where Jim became convinced at the time that he was innocent of putting that hit out on him. Now, to be fair, Saxton is ruthless, and he's taken out someone who he considered to be family before, as far as we know anyway, Nina's father, because he wanted to leave the Enterprise at the time when he was working for him. So he could be guilty of putting a hit out even on someone for whom he felt affection. But if Sax were guilty of Joey's murder, it would be too predictable, and I think a twist in which he's not guilty would be much more interesting. Also, the fact that the FBI agents in Phoenix tried to stop Nina from investigating Joey's death has always been highly suspicious. The FBI has supposedly been trying to take down Sax's criminal syndicate for a long time, but their raids have come up empty so far, supposedly. And the last agent on the case, Leland Breen, wound up in a psychiatric institution. But more on that later. So if the FBI wants to take Sax down, then why did some of Nina's colleagues, such as Agent Grant, tell Nina to stay away from Sax's driver, Jim? Grant was the most vehement about it, ordering her to stay away from Jim without offering a logical justification. Nina was also ordered to stay away from Breen in the institution, but she defied both orders and continued her investigation. Clearly, there's a government cover-up going on. If the FBI wants to take down Sachs so badly, then they should welcome her efforts to investigate Joey's death and question the last agent to work on the Saxton case, Breen. When Nina visited Breen in the institution, he seemed totally out of his mind, but he managed to give her a legitimate clue. He told her to follow the numbers. She later found Breen's missing case files, using the numbers that he mentioned in the conversation with her. They corresponded to random backdated files. She surmised that he hid them away so that no one at the FBI would destroy them. Not long after Nina's visit to Breen, he was found hanging in his cell due to an apparent suicide, but I believe he was killed on the orders of corrupt FBI or CIA agents, and they made it look like an accident. Again, another huge cover-up going on. And then, of course, there's the mysterious cowboy character from DC, who's involved in the conspiracy somehow too, so this thing goes all the way to the top. Even then-President Nixon is involved in this mess too, although it's unclear exactly what his role is as of now. Saxton purchases an incriminating recording of him from the Soviets for $1 million. Former Agent Breen's wife is involved somehow as well. After Nina visited her, she called the cowboy and tipped him off that a new FBI agent is poking around her husband's case, and Cowboy headed to Phoenix to take care of the problem, whatever that may mean. Again, Joey's death was initially reported as an accidental propane tank explosion, but Nina found footage of an explosion originating under Joey's van, suggesting that the police report was a lie. Then Nina and her partner Awan ran a forensic analysis on the van and discovered evidence that it had been blown up with C4 explosives. So either Sachs put a hit out on Joey, the government had him killed, or more likely, in my opinion, the government faked Joey's death. Later, Jim and Sachs meet with Howard Hughes, who says he'll call XAVIER and set up the drop of the briefcase with the Nixon recording. Then he asks to speak to Jim alone. He tells Jim that the CIA concocts elaborate ruses that, quote, shatter the pillars of your life, unquote, and that what happened to his brother was one of them. But he doesn't specifically say that the CIA killed Joey. He just says, quote, it was them. It's always been them. Son, what happened to Joey was entirely their doing, unquote. And the scene cuts there, so we don't get to see the rest of that pivotal conversation. When next we see Jim, he's brooding as he drives Saxton home, prompting Sax to ask why he's been so quiet. Jim responds that Hughes told him the CIA killed Joey. But is that really what he told Jim? Remember, he doesn't specifically say that in the scene we saw. He doesn't use those words. And it's odd how such a pivotal scene with such a huge revelation was cut off suddenly like that. We didn't even get to see Jim's response. I think that may have been by design, to conceal from us the rest of what Hughes told him. Perhaps Hughes told Jim that the CIA faked Joey's death and turned him into XAVIER through their MK Ultra program, or a program similar to it. And Jim may just be covering up what he actually learned there. Or Hughes just doesn't know the whole truth. At any rate, Saxton's reaction is telling. When Jim says that the CIA killed Joey, Sax should look surprised and upset because he had viewed Joey as family. Instead, he just gives some strange side-eye and looks extremely displeased, not surprised. And Sax is awfully quick to dismiss what Hughes said, telling Jim, quote, those were the ramblings of a crazy man, unquote. Although he also adds, or it ain't. I think he doesn't look surprised and looks defensive because he knows what really happened to Joey, and he can't tell Jim that he kept quiet about the cover-up of his brother's supposed death. Hughes' mental state had deteriorated quite a bit as he'd been living as a recluse for years, and we can see multiple bottles of pills in his room, baclofen, a muscle relaxant, and other unidentifiable meds. The fact that this shot is included may be intended to make us question Hughes' believability, but I believe he knows what he's talking about, and it tracks with my theory that I've expressed in my live streams about the government faking Joey's death. Recall that even Breen, who was rambling like a lunatic in the institution, had lucid moments in which he gave Nina a legitimate clue, followed the numbers, that led her to figure out that Breen's old file number actually geographical coordinates. So just because Breen and Hughes are using drugs doesn't mean that nothing they say is reliable. I believe Hughes' revelation that the CIA is behind what happened to Joey, which my co-host Panda Kalima and I predicted near the end of our episode 5 live stream. In a spontaneous theory crafting session, we surmised that the government is responsible for Joey's fate, not Saxton, and the CIA may have given him the new identity of Xavier. And we may find out later that Hughes actually told Jim more than what we saw on screen, that the CIA faked Joey's death. Earlier in the season, after his heart transplant, Royce Saxton was reading a Michael Crichton book called The Terminal Man, which was featured prominently in the shot. I believe this was an Easter egg planted in the scene as a clue, and it also appeared in another scene as well. The book deals with the dangers of mind control, which could be a hint about what really happened to Joey. DUSTER takes place in the summer of 1972, and at that time the CIA was still conducting a highly controversial program that ran illegal human experiments, MK Ultra. Starting in 1953 and ending in 1972, MK Ultra's main goal was to develop mind control techniques through various methods, including the use of drugs like LSD and other psychological manipulators. Near the end of that episode 5 live stream, I had a spontaneous brainstorm that Joey could still be alive, and that the reason for the government cover-up of his true cause of supposed death is because they faked his death. They could have just given him a new identity via the Witness Protection Program, which has frequently been deployed to protect individuals who are targets for the mob. But I think it's more likely that Joey was actually put into the MK Ultra program or something like it, and brainwashed into working with them against Sax's organization. So stick around for more on his potential new identity as Xavier. We've already seen the usage of LSD to unlawfully drug Leland Breen, the FBI agent who was on the Saxton case before. This fake doctor's name was on his prescription, which Nina figured out was a pseudonym for Dr. Invisible. The psychiatric institution was drugging him to make him seem insane when he wasn't. This likely happened because Breen was getting too close to the truth about Sax's operation and what happened to Joey, so the CIA covered it up by having him drugged and locked up. And many of his case files went missing. But he hid at least some of them by backdating them, as I explained earlier. In episode 9, Nina and Awan follow ham radio signals to the home of the person who had supplied $1 million for an item purchased by Sax from the Russians. There, Awan discovers LSD and prescription labels with the same pseudonym doctor name who had been drugging Breen. This implies that the government is using Sax as a go-between to make this deal with the Russians. They could have finally found evidence to put Sax away, so perhaps they bargained with him so that he wouldn't be prosecuted if he worked with them. The Cold War was going on at the time, and tensions were high with the Soviet Union, so the benefit to this arrangement would be that no government agents would be put at risk by meeting with the Russians to procure a mysterious item. Only Saxton and his people. But getting back to Joey, now consider this. As my co-host Panda Kalima, aka Karl, pointed out in our episode 5 live stream, we've never seen a photo of Joey as an adult. But we saw a flashback to Joey and Jim as young children, as seen here, and we saw a photo of Jim and Joey as children of around the same age. This is odd, considering that Jim has visited his dad's house several times, but there's never been a picture of an adult Joey on screen. It's also odd because Jim and Joey served in Vietnam together and were close, yet we still haven't seen a photo of them as adults, while we did see a photo of Saxton and Wade Ellis, Jim and Joey's father, from their time in the military together. Why isn't there a similar photo of Jim and Joey? That may be coming, perhaps at the beginning of the finale. When Jim tries to convince Wade to work with him against Saxton, Wade mulls it over, and in one hand he holds a photo of himself and Saxton as soldiers, while in his other hand he holds a photo of Jim and Joey as kids. This would have been a great opportunity to show us a photo of Jim and Joey as soldiers, perfectly juxtaposed with the other photo of Wade and Sax, but instead we see them as children again, around the same age as they were in that flashback. And I think this is by design. The show has been concealing what Joey looked like as an adult to maximize shock value later on. But why? Well, who else have we never seen on screen? Think about it. Who else has been name-dropped many times and is central to the story? The shadowy figure who we now know only as Xavier. So what if I told you that Xavier could actually be Joey? Near the end of that episode 5 live, once again, my co-host Karl suggested to me that Jim could come across a photo of Joey as an adult sometime before the end of the season. Then we'd get the reveal of Joey as Xavier shortly after that. And I agree that this will probably happen in the early part of the season finale so that his appearance will be fresh in our minds when we see Joey turn up alive in the flesh. Then we'll discover in real time with Jim that not only is Joey alive when he shows up, but he's actually the mysterious Xavier. He's a character who's been name-dropped so many times, yet we've never seen his face. Thus, his identity seems to be getting hyped up for a big reveal. Why haven't we seen him yet? Karl had an amazing explanation for this. What is the reason for hiding him unless his face will be one that we'll recognize when he's revealed and pack a punch as a result? And I can't think of anyone who'd pack a punch here other than Joey. Xavier appears to be a central, potentially controlling force behind the interconnected criminal activities and conspiracies unfolding in this series. He's presented as a powerful, unseen figure who may be the key to understanding the full extent of the conspiracy and the interconnected events driving the plot of Duster. He seems to connect key players in the narrative, including Joey Ellis, Ezra Saxton, Leland Breen, the Cowboy, the Russians, and even President Nixon. So he's not just associated with the mafia. He's also tied to the government's illicit and illegal activities as well. So what do we know about Xavier? He's first name-dropped during a Tucson meeting between Saxton and the Russians in episode 3. As Jim eavesdrops, he hears a Russian say, quote, "When your friend Xavier says how much money he will pay, we set meeting fast," unquote. Now this doesn't mean that Xavier is literally Saxton's friend, though. The Russians are likely referring to him that way because he's an American who has dealings with Sax. Incidentally, the payment that the Russians were referring to was Howard Hughes' Lincoln car, which was stolen in episode 4. So they later had to pay the Russians in cash instead, and Nixon was very upset by this. Anyway, Xavier's name came up again in episode 4 when Nina and Awan looked into everything Agent Breen had told her and found a potential lead: the burnt-out wreck of a car left in the desert inside a Navajo reservation. In the trunk of that car, they find a VHS tape, on which is a recording of Breen telling the viewer to, quote, "expose Xavier and his network, and until then, trust no one," unquote. This suggests he is a dangerous individual or entity, and he's connected to both Saxton's organization and the government, that Nina and Awan shouldn't even trust their colleagues at the FBI. The fact that Nina and Jim both independently found clues related to Xavier suggests that he's a key part of the overall mystery and conspiracy on both sides. In episode 5, the mysterious Cowboy character has a conversation with Xavier on a payphone. Cowboy says, quote, "Two complications. What do you want first, bad or worse?" unquote. Xavier wants the worst piece of news first, and Cowboy says Nixon knows what got lifted, meaning the Lincoln car that had been stolen. This was supposed to be the payment to the Russians for an incriminating Nixon recording, so they had to find another way to procure the money for it. Cowboy mentions 2 FBI agents who saw Nixon and also know about it, Sullivan and Ewing. Xavier is displeased and asks if they know about Kakarov too, and Cowboy doesn't think so. It's unclear at this point what this part means. Then Cowboy relays the bad news, just not as bad as the first piece of news in his eyes, but still bad. He tells Xavier that they have a wrench in Phoenix, a wrench in whatever scheme they have going on. Nina, the new Fed, poking around Sax's operation. He doesn't think they have time to get her in their pocket, implying they don't have time to try to pay her off to go away. Xavier agrees and tells him in vague terms, quote, "Get out there as soon as you can. You take care of it. You got that?" unquote. So clearly he's in a position of authority over Cowboy, who responds that he's already a step ahead and got his ticket to Phoenix. Thus, it's clear that Xavier is a key player in at least one pivotal scheme, the purchase of the incriminating Nixon recording. Remember, he was name-dropped in that initial meeting between Sax and the Russians, and in episode 9, that recording is supposed to be delivered to him. Since Xavier is involved with both the government and Sax's operation, it's likely that the government wanted to purchase that recording and just used Saxton as a go-between. It's also likely that Xavier was involved in silencing Agent Breen. The CIA, Xavier, and potentially Nixon himself may have been responsible for keeping FBI Agent Breen in a permanent fugue state to prevent him from revealing information. But getting back to Sax and Jim in Vegas, they have a conversation about Joey on the way. Sax reminisces about how the last time he was there, Joey had arranged for a meeting with two gangsters from a local syndicate because Sax wanted to buy a stake in some hotels. Marveling at how effective Joey was, Sax says, quote, "Joey knew how to connect people," unquote. And I believe this could be a clue to us that Joey is Xavier. Think about it, they're in a parallel situation now. Here Saxton is in Vegas yet again with important meetings being arranged, except this time, Xavier is the one arranging them. Xavier is obviously adept at connecting people too. He's connecting not only Saxton with the Russians, but also most likely with CIA operatives who probably wanted this Nixon recording to bury it. Saxton tells Jim that the deal to buy a stake in the hotels fell through due to racism, but he met some important people. Jim replies, "Like Xavier?" And Saxton has an odd reaction. He gives Jim a displeased look and changes the subject. Why? Why is the subject of Xavier treated with such secrecy by the writing of the show itself and by conversations such as this one? Again, perhaps because Xavier is Joey. If that's true, then Saxton most likely knows about it but wouldn't want Jim to know that his brother's death was faked and he kept the truth from him. Meanwhile, Nina and Awan locate the home of a man who had supplied the $1 million for the purchase of that recording. Some mail in a drawer indicates that his name is most likely Cyrus Baker. Discovering Awan in the house, Cyrus knocks him out and calls someone, telling him a Fed is snooping around there. The voice on the phone asks if the person is a black woman. This implies that the voice is Xavier, since he's been keeping tabs on her through the cowboy. Then Nina comes up behind Cyrus, who tries to shoot her, but she shoots him first. She tells him she can save his life if he reveals who he's working for, but he responds, "You fucked up. Xavier knows about you." Realizing someone is on the phone still, she picks up the receiver and hears breathing, then a click as Xavier hangs up. Now that voice on the phone had just asked Cyrus about a black woman Fed, which is what Cyrus had meant when he said, "Xavier knows about you." And this is all the confirmation we need that it was Xavier on the phone. And it's safe to say that Xavier is a dangerous figure who has ties to both the corrupt Nixon administration and Saxton's crime syndicate. As Nina helps Awan up off the floor, he sees Cyrus pull the pin on a grenade, and they escape the house just in time before it explodes. So there must have been a great deal of incriminating evidence in that house, which Cyrus wanted to cover up. In the final scene of episode 9, two of Howard Hughes' lackeys attempt to deliver the Nixon recording to someone they believe is Xavier, but he responds, "Afraid not," shoots them both dead, then takes the recording. It's actually a lackey working for rival mobster Greek Sal. It's interesting how Hughes' lackeys don't know what Xavier looks like, so they just assumed this man was him. Who has even seen this man? There has to be a big Xavier reveal coming in the finale, and the most impactful reveal would be that Xavier is someone we already know, Joey, who is still alive. Now, I'm convinced that in the finale of Duster, at the very least, we'll get the revelation that Joey is actually alive. And on top of that, it's likely that he'll turn out to be Xavier. If Joey is Xavier, then I predict that Jim will encounter him, but Joey won't remember Jim or his true identity. Either that, or he'll switch between different alters, so he might be able to remember Jim at times, but he could switch between multiple personalities due to a kind of MK Ultra brainwashing. While the primary goals of MK Ultra were to develop techniques for interrogation, propaganda, and potentially creating controllable agents, some evidence suggests that certain MK Ultra-funded researchers explored methods that could be related to creating and manipulating dissociative states, such as multiple personalities or amnesia. This would be useful for the CIA to do to Joey, because he'd most likely not want to willingly work with them, leaving behind his family and friends. Also, MK-Ultra brainwashing would make him more controllable, and dissociative states would be useful in dealing with the Soviets as well. The Soviet Union employed brutal forms of torture back then to extract information from enemies, so if Joey, with the XAVIER identity, doesn't remember who he is at times, then he could negotiate with them and avoid getting into a situation in which he could be manipulated into giving up US government secrets. Despite never appearing on screen as of Episode 7, both Joey and Xavier have loomed large at the heart of the mystery of this series. Jim is driven by his need to uncover the truth about what happened to Joey as he cruises around Arizona in Joey's Duster and often looks at his army dog tags that hang over the mirror in Joey's memory. Meanwhile, Xavier has been name-dropped in many crucial scenes, and he's had cryptic phone calls with Cowboy, Agent Grant, and Cyrus, the supplier of the $1 million and the LSD with the fake doctor's name. So clearly he's integral to the overall conspiracy and the mystery that entangles the FBI, the CIA, Saxton's operation, the Russians, the cover-up of Joey's supposed cause of death, and even the Nixon administration. So I'm going to go out on a limb with my awesome co-host Karl and predict that Joey will be revealed as alive, that his new identity will be as Xavier, a game-changing twist that will propel the series into what we hope will be a thrilling second season, continuing to unravel the many threads of this mystery. And check out part 2 of this video to see a clip from my episode 5 livestream in which Karl and I spontaneously crafted this theory together as a team. And I look forward to diving into more theory crafting ahead as we continue to cover mystery-oriented series such as From, Severance, and The Institute. And until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.